Alright, welcome back to another video on learning about Node.js, right? Specifically on sockets and how from the, give me a second here, how from the Zero to Mastery course about Node.js, so they started to describe is that we're going to learn the fundamental or something that is fundamental to the internet, sockets. So it'll start by describing with an example. So let's imagine that we're gonna build Discord app, okay, or a WhatsApp app. So with what with all the things that I already know, so using HTTP to send message is something trivial. You can is send message with a post request or read message with a get request. But uh, perhaps, okay, you get a message from another user or your friend. Okay, the question is, how can we notice when we receive a message? Okay, so maybe we're getting that message immediately after we send the HTTP post request, or a couple hours later, or maybe your friend is not excited you to respond that, so it reply you few days later. Okay, it replied you after a few days. So when do we ask for server for new message? The answer lies in sockets. And let's see how can we do it with what we already know. So in our chat app, we saw this question: when to fetch data from the server, and specifically data that is outside of our control, data that we didn't create. And this might be this data might be in their own life cycle. For example, in the chat application or in other contexts that I'm gonna see. Uh, so this data might be in their own life cycle that might be impossible to predict. When somebody wants to chat with us and they message, and yeah, when someone wants to chat with us, uh, for example, okay, and another example is that when we're for self-driving car, when they're receiving this input, okay, that might be impossible to predict when that happens. For example, when a pedestrian signal uh, is nearby. So often we deal with these situations when we count this unpredictability, that the data that we didn't create, and how do we fetch data to process that, okay, in our case in the chat app. So often we deal with these kind of situations like why effectively actually using an approach called polling. And what this means is that we make get HTTP requests so often in a period of time, and when that time has passed, you make a request again in a loop essentially. That's the whole idea of polling, right? So polling works by making a get request so often in a period of time. When that time has passed, you make a request again in a loop essentially. So by defining is the pull rate in a set interval and using the fetch API to get some messaging, we usually store that in a variable. So you might see a couple issues with this. So, for example, how do I choose the right period of time? Is there even a right period of time? Doesn't it depend on how often the data change from the backend in the context of chat application? So with pooling, often the best we can do is just good enough. With 500 millisecond latency, you will add 500 millisecond delay for all of your updates in the whole app. So this might be good for chat applications, okay? But what about the real stuff? Uh, Things like yeah, what about the real stuff? Okay, like self-driving car, stock trading, or games. And the pattern that all of that is that they're dealing with data that they didn't create. So they are in their own life cycles, you know? And again, I'm just is try to understand all of these concepts, okay? And especially when we can use socket, okay, to know when we fetch data from the server, okay? And that is data that, especially data that we didn't create or we don't have control of it. For example, sales, driving cars, all of these elements that they identify from the object detection model, well, all of these different inputs are kind of unpredictable, or it's very, very hard to predict when this come from. So, for example, when a pedestrian or a car, and in the context of stock trading, is when the stock goes to or when the market go up or down, right? When traders buy or sell stuff, and on games is uh, these different asynchronous events that might happen. And again, this is part of the entire core of this. Okay, so just to mention this again about polling, which what it means is that we make HTTP, we make GET requests so often in a period of time, and when that time has passed, we make a new GET request. Exactly. So we make a new request. So we make exactly. So we make a new request. Uh, in a loop essentially. Okay? And this approach will work, but it comes with some trade-offs because it's how do I choose the right time to fetch data? Is there even a right time for do that? Or is there even a right period of time? Doesn't it depend on how often the data change from the backend? Because with pooling, often the best we can do is just good enough. With 500 millisecond latency, you add 500 millisecond delayed updates in your whole application. And this might be good for chat apps, okay? Because you didn't notice that. But what about the real stuff, like self-driving cars, stock tradings, and games? So like ping pong, adding 500 millisecond latency means that you hit or not the ball. So for a chat app, it might be okay. You might think that 2 requests per second is not that round, but multiplied by 60, that you get is 120 requests per minute per users, and then imagine that in an hour in which you have 10,000 users. So, or you need a more expensive server, or you need a different approach. So, sockets to the rescue. Interesting. Okay, so now things are starting to make sense of this. So let's go to socket. No.
All right, so let's get into it. What is a socket? Well, it's really
Hmm. So sockets to the rescue. Okay. So what is a socket? What is a socket?
just a plain old English word. Let's take a look. A socket is an opening or hollow that forms a holder for something.
An opening or hollow. Okay. An opening or hollow that forms a holder for something. That forms a holder for something. From Merriam-Webster. Merriam-Webster. This UK dictionary. The UK dictionary. So a socket is an opening or hollow that forms a holder for something. Okay. An opening or hollow. Okay. An opening or hollow that forms a holder for something. So an electric ball socket, the eye socket. So how do you say that on Spanish, right? Socket in Spanish, right? Well, exactly. Una cuenca. Might be. From Dictionary Cambridge. Okay. In electric, a body part. Exactly. Because in Spanish, it's very contextual as well. But here, it can be a plug into socket by the door, the electrical contacts, and in body parts, it has like it's a socket, all right. So a socket is in Spanish is el enchufe o a cuenca, una cavidad también. Okay. Okay. So socket, depending on the context in Spanish, is o un enchufe o una cuenca, right? But in English, it's an opening or a hollow that form a holder for something. An electrical ball socket is one thing. For example, it is an electrical ball socket para darle algo de sazón. An electric ball socket. Like an electric ball socket, the eye socket, or the tooth socket, an electric ball socket, an eye socket, okay, or the eye socket,
This is true of sockets on the web and in Node.js as well. The something here is just data.
Okay, so the something here is data, and the holder is exactly. So an opening or hole that forms a holder for something. So the holder is data. So the something is data, and the holder is the protocol, the HTTP.
So a data socket is an opening in a computer system which you can connect to send and receive data. It's a holder for this connection on a network of computers. So for something. This is true of sockets on the web and in Node.js as well. The something here is just data.
So the something here is just data.
So a data socket is an opening in a computer system.
So a data socket is an opening in a computer system, okay,
which you can connect to send and
which you can connect to and send
receive data. A data socket is an opening in a computer system which you can connect to send and receive
send and receive data.
data. It's a holder for this connection on a network of computers.
Is a holder for
to send and receive data. It's a holder for this connection on a network of computers.
Is a holder for network, for connection in network computer.
That's it. This communication of data is what the internet is based on.
And this communication of data is what the internet is made of.
For this connection on a network of computers. That's it. This communication of data is what the internet is based on.
Or is based on. Is based on.
You'll see this term come up a lot in various different contexts. You might see internet protocol sockets. These are basically the building blocks of the internet.
Okay. There are holders for it. So something here is just data. So a data socket is an exactly so a data socket is an opening in a computer system which you can connect to send and receive data. It's a holder. It's a holder for connections in a network computer.
You'll see this connection on a network of computers to send and receive data. It's a holder for this connection on a network of
It's a holder. It's a holder for this connection.
computers.
It's a holder for this connection in network computers. So socket is an opening or a hollow that forms a holder for something. So something here is data. So a data socket is an opening in a computer system which you can connect to send and receive data. It's a holder for this connection in network computers. Yeah, it's a holder for this connection in network computer. In network computers. This communication of data is internet based on. There's an opening of a system. There's an opening in a computer system which you can connect to send and receive data, and it's a holder for this connection in network computers. So an example of that is your opening or the way you perceive the world is through basically your sense, right? Your eyes, your nose, your tongue, your touch, your ears. Okay, they are sockets. So they are inputs. Okay. Okay.
That's it. This communication of data is what the internet is based on. You'll see this term come up a lot in various different contexts. You might see internet protocol sockets. These are basically the building blocks of the internet.
Exactly. So internet socket these are basically internet this basically or the IP sockets are basically the basic building block.
You might see the term come up a lot in various different contexts. You might see internet protocol sockets. These are basically the building blocks of the internet. You might see
Of the internet. Okay.
datagram or UDP sockets, which are used where low latency is the most important factor. And
Low latency. Diagram socket. No.
you'll definitely see TCP sockets, where
Mhm.
the internet. You might see datagram or UDP sockets, which are used where low latency is the most important factor.
Datagram sockets when uh, low latency
Basically the building blocks of the internet. You might see datagram or UDP sockets,
or UDP exactly or UDP socket
which are used where low latency is the most important factor.
when low latency is the most important factor.
And you'll definitely see TCP sockets, where the most important thing to know is that they're connection-based. So you need to connect to one of these sockets before you can send data through them. And they're also reliable. So if you send a message, you know whether that message has been received or not. And you'll have WebSockets, which we'll talk about very soon. And even HTTP, which, while it behaves a little bit differently from sockets, is actually built on TCP sockets. We have HTTP connections, right? And if an HTTP request fails, we get extra sockets. Also reliable. So if you send a message, you know whether that message has been received or not.
When reliability is more important, if that message TCP socket, when reliability is more important, is that a message is received
And send data through them. And they're also reliable. So if you send a message, you know whether that message has been received or not. And you'll have WebSockets. The most important thing to know is that they're connection-based. So
TCP sockets, when reliability is more important, and they are connection based. So I'm going to leave this video like that and wish you the best. Take care. Bye bye.